rendering an environment, we started a new one on YouTube. The fact that you're rendering an environment on a screen so others can see that that environment exists, there's still something happening on the level of the computation inside the computer, which is just a binary code that is running back and forth, with logic gates and all of that, compilers and all that stuff. In a universe that computation would not be possible in, you wouldn't be able to produce all of this content. So now the fact that you can produce that is not actually arising from any law of physics, which makes computation a fundamental law of physics, even though we think of it as a separate thing. But it is, in fact, a law of physics. Let's see. Don't accept guests. I do. Grateful Human. I like the handle too. Of course, I accept guests. If you want to put in the topic you want to talk about, and then it doesn't allow me to invite you, but I think you can request, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. What about seeing certain numbers? What do you mean by that, Fabian? You want to answer my question? Wait, what was the question? If you can re-ask the question, Fabian. You guys, this my dad, why you on TikTok? He's more cooking tonight, Dad. Billions of duplicate worlds with every option that can ever happen. Yes, with slight variation that that would be the multiverse, right? I guess in a computational space, what you mean by that is that at bottom, it's not just regularities of nature, but it's what we would call computation, which is all these extra functions that don't exist with just regular laws of physics. That's a good definition. I don't see any holes. Begs the question of what's doing the math. Well, don't forget that the math is essentially is the set of all possible relationships, right? And computation is you can say it's math that math math that is computable. In other words, something that can be executed in a particular point in time that will give you some kind of an output, is a much smaller subset of the entire space of possible mathematics, right? So what is doing you're asking what is doing the compute? Computation is the abstraction, and then the abstraction has to be instantiated in something that is doing the computation. So when you're having a computer, it is computing, but the computation that it's doing is the abstraction that is doing the work. Now, this is a very important point. What is actually doing the work is the computation, not the computer. The computer executes the computation, but the function of computing is the thing that gives rise to the simulation and to all the possibilities in the functions. Creating non-real environments or simulated environments is possible due to the computation, not due to the physical device that is the computer. Because you can build the exact same device, but unless you give it the right instructions, which is the computation, it will not be able to do these things. It will just be a physical object that is not doing anything. Is non-duality the ultimate truth? I would assume that ultimately everything has to be one in that form or another. However, just because something is fundamental on the bottom, it doesn't mean that all the layers that are on top of it or arise from it are not as real in the time that they're happening. I didn't get YouTube notification this time. Strange. Yeah, strange. Do you see the notification now, Cal? Programmed algorithm is, in other words. Algorithms would be, so that's a really good question. Let's see. I don't really see. Oh, hold on. Hey, Grateful Human. Let me accept you. There you go. Now I saw it. It didn't pop. How you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. You actually just spoke to exactly what I wanted to discuss. And I actually discussed it with some very, very brilliant people earlier today. And that is the quote unquote reality of those layers that come from the fundamental structure.
Yeah.
The realness, the reality of them, the less real than the foundational awareness or consciousness from which they can exist. So you're saying they are just as real? What can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's simply to point out that, for example, well, let's take an extreme example because they always help to kind of draw the lines, right? Let's say let's take something super mundane. Like you and I walking down the street, we're going to eat, I don't know, we're going to get some pizza or whatever. You trip, you fall, and you hit your knee really, really hard, right? Uh, it hurts like a motherfucker. Okay, like hurting your knee really bad on concrete is really painful, right? So you go, oh, right, and
Yeah,
I
for
go,
sure.
bro, don't worry, we're all one. This is not real. You would want to punch me in the face, right? So that's my point. My point is that in the moment that you're experiencing whatever it is, it's real to you. So diminishing it to just because there's something more fundamental doesn't make any sense. That's all I mean.
But wouldn't that be maybe a little bit mentally or intellectually lazy? Because yes, I do hear what you're saying. It's real in the moment. The experiences are real. But wouldn't it? Why sort of hide? Why just sort of slap on it that it's real when it can be better expressed if it's true that it's not that it's more real. It's not. It's that this is what this layer represents. And so
Wait,
yes,
so
it's
so
real
just so
to
I
us, but it's
understand
not
you,
actually real.
so just so I understand what you said, are you saying why say that what is more real? The this experience is more real?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, I'm
me
not saying it's
personally.
more real. I'm saying it's as real. I'm not saying it's more real. And I
Okay.
actually agree with you. I actually agree with you that there must be experiences when you get closer to what reality really is. The more up the ladder you go, like getting closer to the core of whatever it is, then it feels more real. I agree with that. In fact, I think we're saying the same thing. I don't know if we even disagreeing
Yeah,
there.
yeah. We are actually saying the same thing, but typically I wouldn't be saying the same thing. I would be saying that the the anything separate from the fundamental substrate upon which all consciousness, well, all expressions of consciousness are upon, they are fundamentally not real. Only the consciousness or the foundation is the only thing of real substance, and this is Maya or illusion or simulation. However, for practicality's sake and for actual experiential sake, I find it beneficial to give it its realness because it's valid, but I just try to keep everything in the right place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think it really depends on what you mean by real. Then that's I think it's just a matter of semantics. I think that for me,
Okay, like within Buddhism, it's the illusion. Within Hinduism, Maya, you know everything everything that is changing, everything in the universe, it's all part of an illusion. This is fundamental to the typical simulation kind of idea, I think.
right?
I'd
So
be interested to see how it correlates from your perspective.
yeah, absolutely. So I actually think so. First of all, before I answer your question, I see your comments, guys. What's up, Biggie Deluxe and Mendel loves cakes. Barely concluding something is real doesn't make it lazy. It's just a simple answer. Yeah, I think no, I think we're on the same page. Let me just get through the comments real quick to make sure we're not missing anything fun. We're not substantially physically manifested in our own reality. Okay, so essentially the comments are about online. Okay, so
Think about how simple of a subject this is and how everyone
I
has
don't.
solved the fundamental nature of reality in the universe.
Right, and I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to do it on TikTok. But the thing with all of these ideas, right, from Buddhism, and I actually we were talking about it 2 days ago. I just came back 3 days ago from a silent meditation retreat, and when you do the practice
Wow.
yeah, so when you do the practice every day for like 11 hours, things become pretty apparent, right? That certain things that you believe on a day to day that matter to you, you realize that they actually don't matter all that much, because you can occupy a state that I guess what you would call more real, because it's closer to kind of like baseline of what experience really is, and you can say that in that state, the feeling that of the self disappears. So like you get closer to what's called non-dual states, and in that state, yes, the only reality in that moment is whatever you're experiencing, and a lot of the mental strain that you go through day to day just vanishes, right? So in that sense, you can say absolutely you want to aspire to be closer and closer to that state, and if you want to play the ultimate game, then yeah, you want to kind of follow in the steps of the Buddha, and reach the final goal, of get into like, nirvana, basically, which is a complete non-attachment from everything. And you can say that then when you reach that state, then from that perspective of that state, all of this was just, like you said, Maya. It was just all an illusion. All I'm adding is that. Yeah, go ahead.
But see, this is why I think this subject is valuable and is important, no matter how simple it might be to some. Because if you have Buddhism fundamentally teaching the complete illusion of all that we can possibly experience through the senses, and that has been around so long, and it's saying yes, everything, the sooner you can appreciate that this is all an illusion and that there's only one conscious awareness, wake up, let go of it, get out of it, that has certain implications. Whereas I believe a more balanced perspective to say, well, is this true? Okay, fine, non-dualism. But then at the same time, no, this is a real experience. So why don't I find some balance so that functionally I can treat this like, in a way that's going to be valuable versus just this illusion, flippant kind of subconscious perspective of reality.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That you always, and in any given moment, no matter how your experience seems solid to you, you want to aspire to see it through the eyes that are closer to what the real reality is, which is that there is no actual self. This is all just kind of happening, right? These are very profound understandings, but there's a difference between entertaining it in your mind and actually experiencing it. And I can tell you that from experiencing the non-dual states a few times, one of the things that, at least to me, was the most outstanding about it is how non-outstanding it is. So when you actually experience in non-dual, or really any gradation of it, it doesn't feel like angels are singing and you're like, oh my god, like there's no rapture. It's just what it is. There's just a room, and you're not in the room. There's just a room.
I've experienced the space that you're talking about. I think, though, if we're depending upon what height of truth we're speaking about it, it's most true to say that if it could be experienced, it was not that. It was not actually non-dual.
Say all of that again.
The most truth, or most clear, the most true that we can make the statement about experiencing non-dual states.
Okay. You disappeared on me there. Okay, well, we'll wait for Grateful Human to come back. That was lovely. But I'm not a Buddhist, but I'm not sure illusion is really the most accurate translation. Yeah. So, well, it is true that the Buddha essentially was teaching He's in a thought loop. Are you still there, brother?
Yeah, I'm here. No, I'm not in a thought loop.
No, you just disappeared. We couldn't hear you. That's why.
No, I wasn't talking.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. Um,
Comments.
got it. No, I thought it
No,
felt
when
like you
I
stopped.
said real briefly,
The what?
yeah, you were reading the comments and kind of following that, and that's cool. But all I said is this: that any quote unquote experience of the non-dual or these non-dual states, if we can say that it was an experience, if that experience was experienced through senses, then the most truth that we could give about that statement is that it was not actually a non-dual statement. Because in true non-duality, there are no senses per se.
That, so I don't know, necessarily where you're getting that from, because at no teaching anybody ever mentions, as far as I know, that there are no senses involved. So you perceive reality through the senses.
Your senses, if it can be sensed through your senses, then there's obviously a separation. Right? Like,
no, actually, no, absolutely not. So I'm open for you to tell me your experience, absolutely, but I can tell you with a high degree of confidence that you can absolutely have a sensual experience in which you're not really attached to the senses, because there is no you to be attached to the senses. So, for example,
those two steps, not only detached from the senses, so to say, but attached to the one consciousness that is all pervasive.
There's not even that. There's just the experience as it appears. So, for example, I'll give you an example. So, in particular sects of Buddhism, there's a practice that in which they repeat a gesture, and then they say it out loud first, and then in their minds that gesture is being executed. So, for example, they would lift their arm, but they would say arm is being lifted. Arm is being lowered. So they're not saying I'm lifting my arm, they're saying arm is being lifted. And then they keep doing this for hours, right? And eventually it all of a sudden dawns on you that, oh, arm's being lifted. Like, I'm not doing this, it's just happening, right? And then you start getting into the whole, there's no you seeing something, there's just seeing. There's just seeing itself, pure seeing from your eyes, pure hearing. Yeah, so we are saying the same thing.
But what I'm saying is, if we are experiencing it, that in and of itself shows a layer.
If you're saying you're experiencing it, then yes.
Above or below all the layers.
So I'm saying that from the perspective, from the experience that I'm telling you about right now, there was no me experiencing it. I'm just telling you this in a way that is intelligible, but there was just experience. There was no me experiencing it. There was just, but you can talk about it. The one?
Everything? Were you experiencing everything?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. No, I mean just in particular non-dual state. So there's levels to it, right? So there's non-dual states.
Okay, but the highest degree, the highest non-dual state, everything that is being experienced is being experienced simultaneously. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure. I don't think you can say much from that. Like, I know what you're referring to, but from these states.
I think that I understand that sometimes you can't pierce that veil. I don't think this is one of those times. What I'm saying is that this underlying conscious awareness is the foundation upon which anything else happens or exists. That has to fundamentally have the characteristic of simultaneous experience of everything that is being experienced. It's going to have that simultaneous oneness part of it, because it's happening upon it, from it, with it's the only substrate for anything to happen.
Have you had that?
No, that's my point. It's impossible.
I see what you're saying. Okay, now I understand. I thought you were trying to describe to me something, but see, the thing is that right now we're trying to describe it, right? And so, for example, you're aware that the Buddha never gave any sermon on mysticism, or he never spoke about the other spaces. He never said a word about any of that. The Buddha himself only taught the technique and nothing else, which is like it was his particular technique of paying attention to the body. Everything we know about Buddhism, like all the metaphysical stuff, came after by people kind of writing and adding their beliefs about it. But the Buddha was very clear that the only thing that matters is the practice itself, so you can yourself reach the final goal, and then everything else is just mental entertainment, basically.
Yep. So the perspective that I'm looking at this, it's more philosophical.
Right.
It's not strictly Buddhist. It's just following this concept of what the fundamental characteristics would be for this substrate upon which all reality occurs. And so there's certain fundamental things. Yes, they do match up with Buddhism, such as the only substantial thing is this conscious awareness. And that's because it doesn't change. It's complete, it's whole. And then you have this fractalization of it where you have, finiteness, which is like the stretch of infinites, but it's finite. So it's not, each of those parts has the foundation within it, but it is not the foundation. The finite could never hold in completeness the infinites. And so that's why if you're speaking of it, the Tao that is spoken of is not the Tao.
Right. But also to add to that, foundation, because something is foundational, at least in the terms that the way that I'm seeing the picture and the way that I'm using it, foundational does not necessarily mean more real. It just means it is the thing out of which everything else emanates. But experientially, as long as you have any experience on any level, any arising level, that experience is real to the experiencer. This is the example that I gave you with the knee. So all the philosophical stuff stops when you bang your knee really hard, because all that matters right now is for my knee to stop hurting. And this was the Buddha's point, which, there's the famous allegory of the Buddha where he talks about you're probably familiar with it, where the guy is being shot with an arrow, right? And then they take him to the doctor, and he's like, "Oh, wait! Before you take the arrow out, let me what kind of arrow is this?" And then he starts analyzing, right? Wait! Was it shot by a man from a horse? What angle did it come from? It's like all this is completely irrelevant, right, to the situation, that you just need to take the arrow out and be better first. And essentially, the Buddha taught that the human condition is. The confusion is that we are that person being shot with an arrow, and we're asking all of these irrelevant questions, because these questions are not actually going to lead you to have a better life, or to be better to other humans and to nature and all that stuff. And all that matters is how moving yourself through the world. There's a time and a place for these questions, and they are fun to have. I love them, but all I'm saying is that the realness of something is not dependent on the philosophical analysis of it. In fact, it's the most removed from it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's different philosophies. Like, for example, Advaita Vedantam. It's a ancient Hindu sort of philosophy, and one of the paths within that, which is basically non-dualism, is specifically through the intellectual philosophical route. Then you might have another one that's through, some sort of through practice, like bhakti yoga or something like that. So I'm just saying that no, through intellectual and philosophical rigor, there are ancient schools of thought that can lead one to the ultimate truth.
I personally doubt that. I mean, anything can be the truth, and I'm not going to rule it out. But from my experience in life, which is, I philosophized so much in the earlier half of my life, and then I slowly started understanding the importance of certain practices, and then the philosophy is still important, I guess, to frame these questions. But ultimately, if you don't put a practice to the mat, so to speak, you're not going to get a situation in which you get better as a person, and therefore you will definitely not reach the final goal. And again, it depends on what you mean by the final goal. If you use it in the same way that the Buddha used the term, he meant complete non-attachment. Nirvana means you don't reincarnate anymore. You leave the realm of not just matter but attachment in general, which can be also attachment to mind and everything else. So you just dissolve into the pre-reality soup, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, let me say that the way that you described that, I really appreciate it. I've done a lot of also sort of the philosophizing, kind of all of that stuff, and ultimately one can get their head stuck in the clouds and run right into the freaking rocks. And so it really is about practicality and application, and then identifying what that goal is, just like you're saying. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I appreciate it, and your wisdom is apparent. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you so much, Grateful Human. Do you care sharing your name, or you prefer to remain Grateful Human?
I don't have any problem sharing my name, but I do prefer Grateful Human.
Okay. Well, then thank you so much, Grateful Human. I appreciate your time.
Yes, thanks for having me, and I hope we can speak again in the future.
Absolutely.
All right, good night.
Good night. Yeah, so I really appreciate this perspective, and I think that it's a legitimate point that, a lot of people are confused on this point. I'm not saying the Grateful Human was confused. I'm saying that when people take it to the extreme, they do find themselves in this position where they care about the wrong things. It sounds, to be honest, from, if you're still here, from your tone of voice and from the way that you are communicating and articulating yourself, it actually sounds like you're in a really good place as a human. You're respectful, your energy is calm, you're collected, you're obviously very intelligent, and you kind of, you explore these ideas. This would be the way to discuss anything and also come to some kind of an understanding, and we learn from each other. I am by nature very cerebral. So for me, it was actually a lot of work. It took me a lot of work to be able to get to a place where I'm philosophizing less and I'm applying more. You got a Grateful Human. And I guess now it's easy for me to understand when people that are very cerebral are coming from, because I also think that there's a lot to be said in favor of a good, what Bohm would call a dialogue. And I mentioned this before, the difference in Bohm has this short book that was basically an article. It's called On Dialogue. I can't say that I highly recommend the short book, because you get the picture within like 2 pages. You don't need to read the book. And essentially the thesis is that there's a difference between a discussion and a dialogue. And in a discussion, essentially, everybody comes with their point of view and they kind of stay there. So it's like a mini debate. It's almost like I say mine, you say yours, and we just kind of do this, right? And it doesn't necessarily even have to be an argument, but it's just like we're there to present our points of view. In a dialogue, we agree, either consciously or subconsciously, that we're not going to just present our point, but we're going to put it together. Each one of us is going to put something in the middle, and we're going to try and construct something new from all points of view of everybody. So that will be the difference, and that will be a dialogue. So as long as we have a dialogue, I think that it can be extremely beneficial for humanity to have these dialogues and to bring to fruition new ideas and structures and understandings. But at the same time, first, each one of the parties, I believe, needs to have also a certain amount of wisdom, which is applied knowledge as pertains to the individual. So the way that I define wisdom is just, somebody once said that wisdom is just knowing how to act on your own advice, right? We're really good at giving other people advice, but it's very difficult to follow through ourselves. So lived knowledge, applied knowledge in life is wisdom. So as long as somebody has an experience and they're speaking out of wisdom, and then they create a dialogue with another human being, then you're building something, and it becomes more than just the sum of its parts. And I think that will be a healthy society, which is something unfortunately, as everybody knows, rarely exists now. But hopefully we can have more of that. Well, I guess it's a very long-winded way of saying I agree with you, Grateful Human, that we do need also kind of like the intellectual point of view, because ultimately you can meditate all day, but you won't be able to build a rocket while you're meditating. And if anybody is wondering why we need to build rockets, well, for many reasons, but I'll give you a practical one. If a meteor comes right now, kind of like what happened during the dinosaurs, thank you for the likes, guys, um, then you won't be able, now you'll be, by building these technologies and rockets, you'll be able to divert and the meteor, and you'll be able to save the biosphere. So that's where you need intellect for. But at the same time, if you build all these tools and you don't have the wisdom of for, I guess, the sacred, for lack of a better word, so like having respect for your immediate environment, the humans around you and all that stuff, you will undoubtedly use these technologies even if you don't mean it. Eventually, because of your lack of connection and care for the environment, you will end up destroying the environment. Not because you're evil or you're aiming to do that, but it's just that you don't have enough care or attention to the environment that you occupy. And the more power you have, that can be very destructive, which is essentially what we started seeing with humans, creating global warming and all that stuff. And even it doesn't matter if you believe in global warming, don't believe in, if it's human made, it doesn't matter. We should always aim to pay attention more to our environment and to preserve as much as possible of the natural beauty of the world, but at the same time to also seek to add something even more beautiful, because we are also nature by the complexity that we are. Some get stuck in the subjective morality argument. Yeah, this is really my point about the whole people, for example, would argue about what is moral or not moral, while at the same time not really applying any of these things in their life. And then there's people who never argue with anyone, but they, without anybody knowing anything about it, they go and feed the homeless, they volunteer, they care for their kids, so there has to be a balance between these things. Exactly, altruism. And the more technologically advanced we are, the more it matters how much we have our shit together, so to speak. I always say, if you want a connection between the most grandiose to the most close to you right now, is everything that was in our minds. Well, not everything, that would be crazy, but a lot. Well, you can say it the other way around. Everything you see in the modern world was in somebody's mind, right? So that's a direct replication of what people had in their minds into the world. Technologies, well, you name it, like everything in the modern world, right? It was somebody's idea first. So in that regard, if we don't destroy ourselves, which is a big if, but if we don't, you run the clock forward, it's just a matter of time, and the universe definitely has time. You run the clock forward 1,000 years, a million years, 100 million years. It doesn't matter how long. Eventually, whatever was in our minds will paint the galaxy, and eventually will paint the universe, right? So what kinds of minds we're creating now will literally determine the fate of the universe. So the way that I say hello to people, the way that I behave on a daily basis, will be a mini influence on future generations of my kids and people that pay attention to what I'm doing. And it will perpetuate. And if most of humanity aims to be a better human, that's the kind of civilization we're going to be, and vice versa. Let's see if we got anything else. What's up, Mandalov's Cakes? We haven't seen you in a while. How have you been? Let's see what you're saying there. Why does it keep doing that? Just because it can become more and manifest more experiences doesn't mean experiences aren't real. Oh, we've been there. Okay, it's while we were talking, I believe. What's up, Biggie Deluxe? Okay, so I think we covered that subject. Anybody else has any new ideas of what we can talk about? Again, apologies that in the last few days I was catching up with whatever I had to do, so I didn't really have time to prepare these things. And if anybody wants to throw in some ideas of potential guests or topics that you want me to dive deeper into, so for example, people throw topics around and I don't really know enough about them. But if you give me specific things, I can actually, kind of read about them and then we can analyze them. What do you want to talk about? Oh, I mean, I'm just doing it now. I'm just kind of riffing. Tortilla, the demo, Tortilla, the demon cat. That is an amazing handle. Balance of feminine and masculine energy within self. Ooh, that's a good topic, actually. That's great, Grateful Human. Thank you for these suggestions. Deep dive on molecule dimensions, see machine elves. Well, I mean, it would be apropos for sure. Do you, Cal? Can I ask you an honest question? Do you guys find trip report compelling? Not in the sense of like, do you believe them or not? Just in the sense that don't they get repetitive? Just because people kind of like say theirs, but it's like, okay, well, I don't know. They get repetitive for me. What do you think this is the fast? What do you think is the fastest way to climb up the ladder, so to speak? Thank you for the question, Sean. Can you specify what ladder? And Grateful Human, yeah, it's pretty redundant, right? So like, I don't mind doing specific. So I don't know if you know this, Grateful Human, but my channel is basically based around my discovery, and you can watch it later, the specifics of it if you want, or maybe you're familiar. I don't know, but basically, I'm claiming to have found proof that we live in what I would call a simulation, and in that sense, specifics about certain things in the space, I would say, yeah, it might be interesting. Not because I'm saying it, but because if people talk about these specifics, because I would say they're more quote unquote objective, then it helps our understanding of the world. But my impression is that most trip reports is just kind of like people's impressions, and they're very vague, and they're not actually, they don't really hold water as far as like telling us anything specific, meaningful about the world. But I really like the idea also, and Cal, I'm not against doing this. I'm just trying to think like what specifically I would talk about that I didn't really speak in my videos. But for example, masculine, feminine, that's really interesting to me. And Sean, I would love to know if from YouTube, I would love to know if you tell me what ladder you were talking about. Specifically, because I'll tell you why. Because obviously, you guys know that we have this whole big one of the hottest topics in the zeitgeist today is the whole male female, is it socially constructed, not socially constructed, that whole thing, that conversation, right? So it's really relevant. I personally believe that feminine and masculine, whatever they are at the core, they are fundamental forces in the universe. So not only it's not human, it's like fundamental to the universe itself. They are the yin and the yang, literally. So that is not to say that like Grateful Human said, each and every one of us has some both of these energies. And obviously you can even have men that have predominantly feminine energy and so on. But I really believe that these forces, they're essentially fundamental to the universe itself. And if I have to give it like a caricature version description of them, it would be that the feminine overall is more kind of like the open-ended energy. It kind of like opens. It likes to keep things open. And the masculine does the opposite. It closes loops, structures, right? So if you have too much of one, then it's too rigid, and then things don't move, and it just kind of breaks apart. There's no give. And the other way around is also true, because if you keep everything too open, then nothing forms. So it's just chaos. So the perfect balance between these two is actually where you want to be, and that's the perfect yin and the yang. One of the things that I always find interesting about the yin and the yang, logo, the symbol, is that the two small circles of the other one in the other side, which to me signifies that the ultimate version, the enclosed perfect essence of the feminine is inside of the masculine and vice versa. So like they contain, it's almost like it contain the seed of one another. Let's see. Law of gender. I never heard of that actually. And I think it's important to recognize this because I like to always take things to the universal scale because it makes it less personal to us and therefore less maybe prone to for people to clash heads over and more curiosity. I don't know why my brain couldn't say that word just now. Curiosity driven versus argumentative. And I really think that's the way to really look at everything. Not again, I said this the other day. I personally don't find politics very interesting. Just this is just mine. It does not mean that I think people should not get into politics at all. I just personally, it doesn't really vibe with me usually. Coming closer to sources. Oh, okay. I understand, Sean. I'll address this in a moment. But for example, when I hear people say things like the Republicans, or they say things like the Democrats, whatever they're going to say next, I know it will have almost no significance to me. Not because, like I said, I don't really find it interesting. It's just that language game, that level of emergence, putting too much emphasis on it and looking at it as if it is the driving force of anything, to me seems to be missing the point. It's the universal things that are actually influencing these things, which is the masculine, feminine, certain drives. Ultimately, these political systems, they're essentially just kind of like the best way so far we found culturally to inculcate some of these energies into organizations that basically kind of deal with particular subjects, but it's all at the core of it, it's these energies. So I like to talk about that. Wait, the reality is the reality is because it doesn't personally affect you, which is selfish. Maybe I missed something. I'm not sure if you're talking about that specifically. Hold on. Let's see. So we have reports are repetitive. Still read and watch them. Wonder how you're different in getting a console. So okay, so let me try and without allowing my ADHD to kick in too much, but I'll try and address some subjects like side tangents for a second. The console Cal appeared to me after I built the laser, so maybe that's the difference. I'm not sure. I also felt that they changed something about my experience, but also I said I met two people that also experiencing. I had a few people that told me that they see the console, but two people that I know certainly that they see the same thing because they emailed me and told me details before I released the console video. So they told me things about the console that I never told them, and then they knew about it. So I know at least two other people see it for sure. And then I'll address Sean's question from YouTube in a moment. That's so in line with my thoughts. I see a gradient spectrum of traits for masculine fem. Yeah, exactly. Alaskan Red. Thank you. The reality is so Posi Palabra. See, this is where my dyslexia always kicks in with these things. Posi Palabra. The reality is because it doesn't personally affect you, which is selfish. If you can specify, because I'm not sure what you mean by that, we can understand that all actions have effects, though everything is still not be interested. Oh, yeah. So I'm not sure if I fully understood you. Interest in politics. Yeah. So I'm not sure if it doesn't come from a selfish place at all. I just know that it's not what is causing that thing. At least to me, it's obvious, right? So, for example, let's be specific. Like, for example, when people say, think of an example that is very often used. So, let's say, what would Democrats blame the Republicans and vice versa usually? So the Democrats would say, oh, they don't care about human rights, let's say, right? Because of abortion or whatever it is, right? And Republicans would say, oh, like you're too loose with whatever, and we gotta We need slightly more rigid rules because this is the word of God. So they associate it with religion. I'm just taking like caricature versions of it. Obviously, this is like super caricature, right? But just to illustrate the point. So, for example, in the example that the Democrats blame Republicans for being too cruel, that they don't care, but it's not. So it comes from the impulse to want to care for other human beings. So the fundamental thing here is empathy, right? Empathy and trying to connection, right? That's the driving force. The second you start putting it in terms of regulations and all that stuff, this is already the result of either caring about that thing or not caring about that thing. So if you, for example, if you don't blame Republicans, which are just people, right? If you don't blame them for not caring, it's not that they don't care. They believe that their way to care is to put in, because they really believe that if you put more structure around it, people will behave better. Now, there's data in both directions, depending on the situation. But if you talk to the person about their internal drives, the more fundamental things, they're much less likely to resist what you're saying because they feel like they're being seen. So you're talking to the actual person and what their drives are. And also, you're not talking about things that, in fact, you yourself in that conversation, so you can have some sway, right? Because of like public opinion about certain things. But ultimately, what you want to address as humanity as a whole is you want more humans to be open to a conversation on a regular basis that allows them to also change their minds. The second you put yourself into these bunkers and you say, that's it, you drew a line. This is a Republican, this is a Democrat. I know everything about them. That's it. There's no more conversation. There's just rivalry. And in that sense, it's both counterproductive, not actually getting anywhere, and it's not an infinite scope channel. You can't actually get to the ultimate thing. If I would be closer to it, I'm sure I would care more, obviously. If my job would be related to political subjects and I would have to worry about policy and things like that, yeah, of course I would care. But it's not selfish. It's just that I know there's very little I can do unless I'm willing to take, and go and like protest or something. Just talking on social media, that's actually the selfish part because you're not actually influencing anything. You just kind of people who, I'm not saying you personally, but people who just do that a lot, they're just running their mouths. They're not actually making any change happen. Yeah, they want to take away guns. Yeah, so you see guns, it's a great example. Why is it a great example? Because it's funny because I had a friend of mine who's an actor, and he was on my podcast, and his friend who's actually a very liberal person, but he also happens to be a judge. And so he understands the law like very, very deeply, right? But he's a liberal, like he's definitely on the left, the guy, his friend, and he was sitting on the side. And then we started talking about guns. And we realized very quickly, I'm not going to get to the points now, but as me and Russell started talking about it, and then his friend, his name Daniel, I forget his friend's name, but he started basically kind of throwing comments from the side, and he started educating us about the specifics about where these laws came from, why the Constitution, why was this put in, and all that stuff. And then very quickly, both me and Russell realized that we actually don't know what we're talking about. Like because we were regurgitating, the regular points that people make. You name it, right? Like, well, would you have less crime, more crime? Well, it depends on the state, depends on the situation, blah, 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 whatever. But ultimately, for example, one of the things that I remember his friend said is that the whole idea there was that, first of all, from a practical point of view, the United States is the United States. So it should not be up to the federal government to decide, especially if it's in the Constitution, if California wants to, put this into their law to put certain modifications for whatever reason, that's fine. But they have no right to tell Alabama how to behave. They have no right to do that by the Constitution, by the way that we all agreed that this system is built, right? And because even just by him saying that kind of stuff, which brought us like to this level of thinking, right, of like where this whole thing emanate, made me realize how little difference the points we were trying to make actually play. Like they don't actually matter. like especially because we're so far away from the subject, and because we actually don't understand the details of where these things come from. So long rant to just basically say that if you don't go to the more the essence of what the problem really comes from, and I'm saying that the problem always comes from the human dimension and not from some kind of a political system that is just a result of how humans behave in that country. It's not separate states exactly. I'm pretty. By the way, just so everybody know, I'm pretty sure that sandwich is just it's just a comment farm. Just trying to instigate. It's really funny. What do you think of Loretto Staircase? Let's see if I remember what that is. And Sean, I didn't forget about you. I'm gonna answer your question now. Loretto Staircase. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Okay, so you're gonna have to be more specific. But I'm gonna after this I'm gonna research. So there was a question on YouTube. What do you think is the fastest way to climb up the ladder, so to speak? And then I asked, what do you mean? And the clarification was rising vibration, coming closer to source sustainably. I would say the fastest real way is to actually like meditate. And the best way to start doing that for real is like what I did a few days ago, which is go to Vipassana. I'm going to type it right here. Just Google Vipassana like that. Vipassana, and the where you live, and it will show you the closest location. It's free. All you got to do is sign up and show up, and it will give you a great start because it will put you in basically a boot camp of learning how to meditate proper versus all the ideas that people have about it on YouTube. And after you have some of the basic practice, now you can start exploring other domains, but at least you can have a baseline of how to actually practice and not to philosophize about it, right? And that would start moving you in the right direction, because we can have a lot of intent to wake up and feel this drive, but at the same time the modern world is very aggressive and it's around us all the time. And when I say aggressive, I mean not just like in a violent sense, but it's just aggressive. It's just coming at you all the time, right? You open your phone and it's just aggressive, and that, either you like it or not, makes it very difficult to drop to the right level from which you can start waking up and going up the ladder, the ranks, so to speak. Also, maybe thinking of it less in terms of ranks and or ladder, and more, which is how the Buddha, talked about it, which is a path. So you're walking on the path because it's like it's a journey. But Vipassana is definitely one of my biggest recommendations, and obviously, certain substances can help, but I would say they can only open the door for a certain understanding. In order to really get to a level of where it's sustainable, you got to practice. And this is where meditation really comes in. And again, meditating at home is great, but it will not give you the actual proper understanding that you need unless you go and you immerse yourself in that environment and really do it 10 hours a day for like 10 days. And then you really start to understand. I meditated for many years before I went. And when I went, I realized I've really never meditated 1 second of my life. Which was somewhat painful, but yeah, Vipassana just with 2 S's, the way that you spelled it, 11 in between 11, just with 2 S's, but that is correct. What kind of vibration are you talking about? He's basically talking about the different levels of. So there's this belief that we vibrate in a particular frequency, and then when you wake up or you get more enlightened, your vibration goes up. I think these terms are a little bit murky and don't really get to the truth of the matter, but I understand what he means by that. Kind of, and you talk about this being a simulation and such. You should research Loretto Staircase. as well as Codex Gigas. I would like to know your thoughts. So let me just put it in my notes real quick. So we have, I just Googled it, and what came up wasn't really what I thought it might be. Staircase, but thank you for the suggestion. And Codex Gigas. Great. I appreciate it. Okay, and this is by, let me also put your handle, so that way I'm going to make the subjects Mac. If you come back tomorrow, thank you for that. And I'll research some of that, and then we can talk about it more in depth. Sean, does that answer your question at all? Do you have more questions? Feel free to ask more if you want. These are miracles. One angelic and one demonic, in my opinion. I see. Okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to read about it and tell you what I think. Oh my God, please repeat that. I was getting a call. Repeat what? Alaskan Red? Repeat what? Everything I said so far in this hour? What do you want me to repeat? They're kind of murky, but the law of vibration does support actual higher vibration. Appreciate it inside. You got it, Biggie Deluxe. Thank you for always joining. And yeah, Alaskan Red 79. I'm not sure what you want me to repeat. You can say. Maybe Vipassana, is that what you meant? Vibration. Oh, vibration stuff. I've had some weird experiences meditating over my life. Yeah, so actually this is a really good point to touch on. And it really gets to the core of a lot of the confusion that I think that exists in that space, which is that very often people, well, okay, I can't generalize. I have no idea, right? That's the truth. But it seems to me that a lot of people want to talk about meditation and some of these subjects almost like to have a discussion about themselves gaining all kinds of like superpowers, having special experiences, right? Which, by the way, can definitely happen. I don't call them superpowers, but you can definitely have very strange things happen if you get to certain meditative states. That's true. But if you want to go again according to what the Buddha taught, his position was very clear. None of it matters. So if you get caught up in, like, I don't know, you had like a very blissful experience of some sort, or you saw an angel, or like any of this stuff that on the surface is very positive, the Buddha, for example, said that this is one of the biggest traps. Not because it was set up as a trap for you, but because you develop attachment to whatever that was. And it is true, when you have like a very blissful sit, where you sit for an hour, you have a really good meditation session. The next one almost always is horrible, because you automatically cling to that feeling. You're like, ooh, I want that again, and then when the next one you just get pain, you're like, there's extra suffering. So the point is to not attach to anything. Even if you get the really blissful one, you can enjoy the feeling in the moment, but don't attach yourself to it, which is very difficult to do. So all of these things about this is why the thinking around what vibration I am, according to the Buddha, as long as you're inside the karmic cycle, it doesn't matter. You are still what he called inside the house. So you still have the same problem that everybody has to. So even if you go to the highest realms, the Buddhists do believe that there's like levels, and when you go to the highest possible realm, where these gods live millions of years, they're still mortal. They just live a very long time. And even if you spend 100 million years in complete bliss, at the end of that, you can still burn out your karma, so to speak, and fall to the lowest of hells. So in that sense, you're still in the same cycle. And this is why the Buddha insisted, it doesn't matter what you do, just get out of the house, just achieve nirvana. You want to step outside of that. And part of doing that is to not attach to anything, no matter how blissful or amazing it is. So all of these experiences that you might have during, slowly ascending, fifth dimension, people talk about like, well, we're ascending to fifth dimension, all that stuff. As long as you're still attached, you have the same problem. So no horrible, just weird. Yeah, weird, definitely, especially with the molecule. Can you wipe for me? I've been a bad. Jesus Christ. Oh my God, this is. Let's see if I missed any other comments. Mac was saying these are miracles in his opinion. Not attaching to anything seems extremely difficult. Yeah, it is the most difficult task because your mind always wants to either cling to something or push it away because it defines it as either good or bad. And the whole point of the actual practice is to completely detach yourself from that, which is very difficult. Can you give 3 recommended readings? Actually, yes. The first one that I will always recommend first is The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. Actually, yesterday I learned how to use the chat, believe it or not. That was the first time I managed to do it. So let me write it down. The Beginning of Infinity. Infinity by David Deutsch. I think that's how you spell his name. That's my favorite book by all definitely. By all means is what I meant to say. Then well, obviously Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That'll be one of my all-time favorites. By Douglas Adams, I forgot to put. And one that I'm actually reading right now, or actually I'm listening to it. Hold on, I'm going to pop out for 1 second just to give you the exact name. Active side of India.
That it didn't permit me to ponder.
All right, I'm back. It's called The Active. Oh my God. Side of Infinity. Wow, it's so hard to type on this. Okay, so The Beginning of Infinity, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and The Active Side of Infinity. These are very, very good books. The Beginning of Infinity is by David Deutsch, who's a physicist. And he basically, it literally is like a new operating system on your brain. Like it's the most hermetically sealed argument for knowledge that I've ever seen anywhere. And is beautifully written. And he goes through art and music and science and everything. And he shows how we're reaching the stage that he calls the beginning of infinity. And it is a very positive book based on all the fundamental things we know about the world, and it's fascinating. It goes through language and genes and culture, everything. It's amazing. It's my favorite book of all time. And The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy needs no introduction, probably, by Douglas Adams. I recommend to read all 5 books, but even the first one is one of the most brilliant books ever written. And the Active Side of Infinity, it was recently recommended to me by a friend. It's part of a series of books, but it's essentially kind of like The Alchemist. It's like a story about a guy who meets this spiritual teacher, and the whole book is basically a conversation between them. And that spiritual teacher, kind of is very cryptic, obviously, and the way the guy learns about himself and his potential and about his life is fascinating. I haven't finished it yet, but it's extremely well written. It's very well written. Like as far as like a literary piece, it's wonderful. So these 3, I would say they're right on top of my head, on top of my mind. Let's see what else we got here. Can't wait. Oh yeah, You Grateful Human, you would vibe with The Beginning of Infinity. I'm telling you, it's mind blowing. Especially because David Deutsch is a physicist. He's actually responsible for the Deutsch equations, which made quantum computers possible. So he knows, the technical stuff. He understands very well. But I would say that this book is more like an applied philosophy, which is rooted in deep understanding of the world. It's actually kind of mind-boggling how clear he sees all of these things. It's amazing. Thank you, Dan. We're also just wondering if is nirvana the one and only way to escape the karmic cycle of the third dimension? And if so, does progress made in this incarnation carry over to the next life? Before achieving nirvana, can you incarnate as a higher dimensional being, or is the only possible after? Great question, Sean. So the question is nirvana essentially is nirvana is the only way out? The short answer is yes. The definition of nirvana is essentially that you get that. So it's not just in 3D, by the way. The karmic cycle is in all the dimensions in existence itself. Nirvana is outside of existence, basically. You no longer attach to anything in existence. So you reincarnate between all the different levels according to your karma, right? So you can say, oh, I'm going up the levels, but then you're still in the same problem. You still have the same problem because eventually you might go down, right? And so there's something called sankharas, which are essentially, they're the units of attachment, you can call them. And sankharas there's three different kinds. There's the ones that are right on the surface, which are equated to a line in water, which basically doesn't exist. You do this and there's a line in the water for 2 seconds and then it goes away. That would be equated to something, somebody said something to you and it was mildly offensive. There's the deeper sankhara, which is like lines in sand, which is that you make a line in the sand, by the end of the day that line will disappear. Maybe an argument with your significant other, things like that. And then there's the ones that are carved in stone, which are like the traumas. And there's the ones that are like cosmic. They're like, your soul cannot have a trauma because it's infinite and it's immutable. But essentially it's the equivalent of, you carry this sankhara with you throughout the generations. And that is the thing that, so even though your physical body dies, the last sankhara that is attached to your state of being in that moment of your death is what propels you to the next life, which means that the quality of your mind in the moment of your death will determine the next life. That's according to the belief. So if you're a very miserable person, your next life is going to be even more miserable, because if you occupied that state of mind, you propelled to the next world in that way, right? And by the way, it has to do with your actual natural state. This is why they don't recommend to ever be, drugged out or when you die, because even if somebody pumped you with a bunch of heroin right before you died, your top layer, the body, felt really good, but it's what's inside, the deepest the deepest essence of what you are, it is still experiencing the same misery that you've experienced your whole life. And it basically masks, you're not actually meeting where you really are, and that can be very dangerous when you move on to the next life. Okay, so holding all of that in view, when you achieve, there's levels to awakening and liberation. So there's something called Arahan, which is a title that is given to a person who is fully liberated, but that is not an enlightened person. There's a difference. If you're fully liberated, all it means is that you reached a state in which you're no longer creating any new sankharas. So you're still burning the old ones, but you're fully liberated from the potential of creating new ones, which means that you're on your way to enlightenment, but you're not enlightened yet. When you're enlightened, it means you burned out all your sankharas, you eliminated the deepest ones, so you have no more attachment to anything at all, which means that at the time of your next death, there will be nothing to propel you to the next life, which means you no longer reincarnate. Not to the next realm, not to the 4D, 5D, 1000D. You're not reincarnating at all anymore. So all reincarnations are still inside of the wheel, and you want to get out of it. So yes, nirvana would be the only way out. Oh no, I'm telling you, the sandwich is not even something for restricted reason. Good content. It says that some notice is unclear. I'm not sure why I got this. Yeah. The content mentioned in notice. I understand this. Submit. So yeah, so it's saying that we're saying something that we're not supposed to be saying. I'm not really sure why We're just talking about reincarnation. Maybe because we mentioned the word DEATH. That is strange. And just so you know, Sandwich is definitely a comment farm. This is not a real person. Let's see. Before achieving nirvana, can you? Oh, okay. So yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Sean. Live restricted for some audiences. Your live contains themes that some may uncomfortable and has been restricted. Reasons. Huh. Weird. Okay. Well, it says that I was restricted for some reason. Talking the conversation. Actually, here's what I'm gonna do. Sandwich. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring you on, and we're gonna hear if you're a real person, and we're gonna chat for 5 minutes. But I'm letting you right away. Then that if you're not respectful, then I will definitely kick you out and I will block you. But hopefully we can have a good conversation. Go ahead.
Will definitely.
How you doing, man?
My friend, I don't doubt for a second that you're going to disconnect me before we have 5 minutes of conversation. I'm already well aware of that.
How come?
You're frightened by the things I have to say, and it's obvious. It's obvious. It's clear as day that you're afraid of what I have to say, and you're frightened. So cut me off at any point in time when you feel scared. If you're scared, it's okay. It's okay. It's all right. So, like I said, I have zero faith that we will have a conversation that will last more than 120 seconds, because I can tell that you're already intimidated by me.
Wait, so what was the point of coming? What was the point of coming on then? If you're committed to that trajectory, what was the point of coming on?
I was coming on to say that, hey, listen, he's not going to want to speak with me and speak on the truth in the slightest bit. He's going to cut me off at every opportunity that he gets because he's afraid. He's a scared little boy. He's got long hair. He's a feminine little child. And I intimidate him, and it's okay. But at the same time, I'm your daddy, brother. I'm your daddy.
I see.
So if you were...
All right. Well, it sounds like you actually have nothing of substance to say. All right. And he actually, are you there? It sounds like you actually have nothing of substance to say.
I'm being honest, my friend.
Yeah. Okay.
Just
Well,
being honest.
All right. You voiced it. You have a wonderful day, man.
I'm just being honest. If it frightens you, I understand. It will frighten me too, because
Okay. So we tried. But that's okay. All right. Look at that. He was right. But I think we went for more than 120 seconds, so maybe it wasn't exactly right. I was actually surprised that it's somebody who even came on, because with a comment farm, you're not gonna have time to actually get on the chat and do anything. But hey, I wonder what drives people like that. I mean, think about what it actually requires from somebody to take their time of the day, get on a chat. Because if that's an actual person, right, they can't be on multiple chats, so they can't be trolling like a lot of places, which means that they have to go on one chat and waste their time doing this. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure that there's always a way to reach through to these people, because ultimately it has to be some kind of just a lack of well, it definitely is. People always project, so it definitely comes from a fear response to something. Any animosity does. So I wonder but I really wonder, like, what actually gets somebody like want to spend their time doing this versus something else. Sorry to go back. Self-hatred and pointless negativity. Oh yeah, no, he's been here a few times. I don't just block people. I just wanted to see sometimes a person actually has something to add. They just don't know how to address it, and that happens too. But that wasn't the case here, so it's a waste of everybody's time. Sorry to go back. How does one love yet remain unattached? That is a great question, because most of what we mean, maybe psychosis or schizophrenia episode. No, it was not psychosis, schizophrenia. It's I don't know what that is, but definitely something. Yeah, some issue. How does one love yet remain unattached? What is the somebody asked? Sean asked, what is the fun of no longer existing? Well, you can't really understand a state outside of reality, right? But that's basically the only place where you're just outside of the whole thing. Again, how do you love and you remain unattached? Let's start with the fact that what most people mean by love is they mean egoic love. In other words, they mean it's basically attachment. So it's by definition attachment. It's like I want everything. I want the attention of that. It's an infatuation. It's not really love. It's an infatuation. It's like I want the attention of that person. And by the way, it is always true that when you fall in love with someone, you're not really falling in love with them. You're falling in love with you with them in that moment, either because they're very beautiful, talented, whatever reasons you think you love them, because you don't love them. You love the fact that you got a person that is with you, which is a self-validation that says something about you, right? And that's eventually you kind of learn how to recognize this, that ultimately you only love yourself. And that is true. This is actually a very Buddhist understanding. And if you mean love as like the binding force of, as people describe it, the binding force of God or the binding force of the universe, ultimate love can actually be very scary, because it means I think that if it's a real force in the universe, then it's something that basically encompasses the whole thing. And the reason that the light of God is blinding is because if it's love on such a level that you have to merge with it, you have to become part of it, which means that you lose your individuality completely, and it's just you one with it, which is also a scary process. So if we're saying this universal love kind of thing, then by definition it is lack of it's the opposite of attachment, because you literally become one with the unit. But what we mean by love on a human level is more infatuation. It's not really love. And that will definitely get you away from being able to get enlightened. This is also why the true path of becoming enlightened will always include a portion in which you let go of everything, including any need for significant other, any need for kids, any real need for food, any real need of any kind. You might sustain yourself longer to just stay alive if you choose to. Maybe you want to, just like the Buddha did. Maybe you want to teach. Hold on, one dog is trying to eat the other dog. I gotta detach them real quick. I gotta blank. For a night. Have a good night, Ted Bear. Oh, good to see you. Yeah, come back tomorrow. So that's about the love thing. And to your question, Sean, about what's the fun in no longer existing, again, I kind of addressed it shortly, but yeah, it's you can't even imagine that that the state of nirvana. But it's, people say it's infinite bliss, but I don't even think it's bliss. It's just infinite neutrality. You become part of infinite neutrality. And again, if it's hard to entertain these things from the perspective of a finite human, but if you think about it, here's a question for you, because that's essentially really the question if you're in the karmic cycle, right? If you're going to experience 100 million years of the highest possible bliss you can ever have, which is the highest of heavens, You are one of the highest of beings, and you're experiencing it for 100 million years. Is it worth that if it guarantees that at the end of that, you're going to fall into the depths of hell? Is it worth it? You see what I mean? So from the perspective of somebody that is a human for whom 100 million years sounds like infinity, you're like, maybe you say, yeah, sure, but 100 million years is not infinity. It ends. And then might not be worth it. You know what I mean? So that's why you want to potentially just get outside of the house into nirvana. See you, Ted Bear. Whoa, what is that? Balloons. That's awesome. What a slow boy. I think the what's his name? I think what's his face? Sandwich appeared as a different code name on YouTube. It's hilarious. That's like a whole like I think I have a stalker. So that would be to you. That would be the question, the answer to you, Sean, as to why you want to wait. There's a balloon next to me still. Oh, there's all these new things. Wait, how do you do this? There you go. Zena, relax, baby. What's up? We have a new puppy, and it gets on our husky's nerves sometimes because it's trying to eat her collar. Let's see what that is. Okay. Oh, why are these the only options? I don't know. Okay. Well, let's just do that. Cool. All right. Let's see what else we got. Good night, Biggie Deluxe. Isn't that forced detachment? Well, no, because when you, I don't know if that was the word that basically got us in trouble, but when you DIE, TikTok is so weird. Then you proceed to the next life. So you're in the karmic cycle. So you're not really, you're not detached at that point. Okay, come here. Whoa. Stop. It's crazy. Okay, I see a lot of people are kind of also calling it a night. I think it's a good time for us to also adjourn for today. And tomorrow I'm going to do some research into what I think it was Mac who was saying it, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion about it. In the meanwhile, everybody have a good night. Thank you for joining, and see everybody mañana. Peace and love. It's weird. Okay. Good night, everybody on YouTube.